Hello, everyone. Today we have Hailey here. And yeah, maybe you want to introduce yourself a little.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Hailey Campbell, and I am from the United States. I am the co-executive director of the nonprofit Careaboutclimate, as well as the contact point for the Action for Climate Empowerment working group of the official children and youth constituency of the UNFCCC, otherwise known as YOUNGO. It's a lot of acronyms, but in short, it's the ACE working group co-contact point of YOUNGO. So, yeah.
Okay, so what are you doing with ACE and Action for Climate Empowerment? What is the key questions there? What is it about?
So ACE is Article 12 of the Paris Agreement, which sets the guidelines for what we're doing at these COPs. And ACE is 6 different elements that countries have agreed on to empower their communities to act on a climate crisis. So there's education, training, access to information, awareness raising, public participation, and international cooperation. Those are the main elements. And so here at COP, they are talking about a new action plan and how they're actually going to commit to different actions to make sure that they really are empowering their communities, which is a really exciting development because ACE has been around for 20 plus years. It's also part of the UN Convention on Climate Change, and they're just now finally coming together to actually act on it. So that's really exciting.
So is it a good COP for ACE or a bad COP for ACE?
Yeah, I think it's a middle COP for ACE. We did get an ACE decision, which is exciting, and there were a lot of negotiations. I think I was in like 20 plus hours of negotiations last week, and they all came to a conclusion on Saturday with the adoption of the action plan. So we're really excited to have that. And I think the highlights for us are, one, it recognizes young people as stakeholders who have a responsibility in different categories to be a part of the solution. So they can't ignore us anymore. We're their stakeholders, which is really exciting. And one of those key actions is including young people as decision makers on climate policy, but also as implementers. So it's both in decision-making processes and implementation of climate policies and actions. And that's like, you couldn't ask for more than that, right? Like that's what we're asking for. That's what we want. And so that's really exciting. And so that's kind of the bright spot. But maybe a less bright spot, a low spot, if you will, is unfortunately we couldn't get past any language on funding for the ACE agenda, not just for funding people to participate in these events, which is there, but funding on actual ACE activities, like funding education initiatives or training initiatives, which are underfunded in pretty much every country around the world.
So what happens then with ACE? So can you maybe bring it down to a local level?
Yeah.
Why is ACE important? Maybe also for local or national action?
Yeah. So my day job actually is in adaptation work and community empowerment in that. So I can maybe go with a concrete example is sometimes people don't realize that they're talking about climate change when they're talking about climate change. And it's really important for people to have this terminology and to understand that the work they're doing is impacted by something more than maybe what they see worse in the future. And so it's really important that people understand the risks, especially when you're talking about adaptation. And so for us, an example is I helped create with the office local climate change games on how to beat the heat and how to be sea level rise instead of sea level rise. And we brought them to community where they were able to learn about how to build solutions and think about the future on climate change on the island of Oahu. And now there's a bunch of different community leaders activated on climate change that are ready to keep talking about it and bringing it back into the community spaces that they're working in, which is the really essence of ACE. It's about how do we get everyone to learn and understand about climate change, but also learn and understand their role in tackling the climate crisis as well. And to that end, also bringing in those Indigenous voices and seeing what that looks like, especially in the Hawaiian context. That's really essential. So that's kind of the local level.
And where does it connect to the ACE? So because now it's a decision here that is maybe more theoretical, and how is it now helping this decision to support the work you're doing for adaptation?
Yeah, so ACE, and in this international space is like, we have all these different commitments, and at the local level, a lot of people are already doing this work, which is really exciting. So this is recognizing that work, trying to uplift that work, which is really important. But the way it moves the work forward is by giving people and communities something to kind of hold on to. So as me as a young person, My local government doesn't have a youth climate council, for instance, and I think that's a really good way to make sure we have youth participation in climate decision-making spaces per the action plan. Then now I have this document I can take to my city government and say, hey, like our national government agreed to this. Here's my idea. Like, what do you think? And like, this is where they agreed to it. And like, therefore we need to do something. So it's really important as a tool in a way. It's more of a tool for us as civil society to use. I think that's really, really essential.
Thank you. We have the first questions here. So maybe the one, what political demands do you have for the ACE process, and what will happen with ACE after COP27? Will it also be discussed at the SBs?
Yeah, so
maybe first
the demand,
explain the SBs
yes,
first, and then go deeper
Yes.
on it, because I don't know if everybody knows what the SBs are.
right. So y'all know that we have COP. That's what we're here for. The SBs stand for subsidiary bodies, and these happen every year, actually in June and also during the COP. So every single agenda item falls under something called the subsidiary bodies. And there's one on implementation and one on science and technology. And these bodies basically track the different negotiation tracks that are there and push forward the informal notes and decisions. So basically it's just a way of categorizing the different groups of negotiation tracks, science, or whether they relate to implementation. And climate negotiations. And so for the demands for ACE, a lot of them were on youth inclusion as stakeholders, which we got. The importance of having a national strategy be designed on ACE, because a lot of countries are, again, not really pushing forward a lot of the elements altogether in their policy making right now. And so that's what we really want to see. However, national strategies was just kind of mentioned as like an encouragement, which is typical of the UN, to encourage countries to do something so that they don't actually have to do it, which is also the essence of the Paris Agreement, right? You're encouraged to reduce your emissions, but there's nothing holding people accountable if they don't do that. So it's kind of the same back and forth on ACE. And in terms of what's next, that's a fantastic question. I was talking with some people last night and I was like, I've only ever been a part of this since there have been negotiations. Like, what am I doing? And they were like, you get to implement. So in the action plan, there's more on implementation at the SBs, at COPs, and regional climate weeks, on localizing workshops on ACE that we're hoping we'll be able to hold governments accountable to. So if you're interested in this topic, I definitely recommend checking out the action plan and seeing how you can use it as a tool to push forward some of the work that you are doing, and also even get, possibly like credit for it and showcase to your government, like, hey, this is the local solution. Like maybe they can help support that in some way.
Now we have maybe a little broader picture, not only in ACE, but it's about how you perceive the atmosphere and possibilities for young people to launch actions, events, say, at this COP specifically.
So we've seen a lot of suppression of, the usual big actions that are at COP. Usually it's, there's people on the streets, there's people outside of the venue organizing stuff, there's people in the venue organizing really large actions. But unfortunately this year, we're not allowed to be in the streets taking actions there. We're not allowed to be standing outside the venue with our, like last year there was quote lit signs and things like that. And even when you do an action inside, there's also limitations on the number of people that you can have. And so that has been difficult. However, a lot of constituencies and young people really came together to make it work. And I think that it really shows how united that we all are as civil society, where we organized a march of, I don't even know how many people were in that, but there had to have been like at least 500 people, I feel like, going in through the COP venue. And so we were able to organize that together, and it was an amazing success. And so it's been challenging, but I think it just shows that civil society is united from around the world. And if we can unite in all different perspectives and backgrounds, then countries should be able to do that too.
So now it's a little longer one. I saw that you were celebrating the inclusion of youth as stakeholder in ACE on social media. So people are following you.
Yeah, apparently you're following on social media. Thank you.
So how did you push for this? How did you make it happen? Maybe some tactics. How can maybe you influence these negotiations?
Influence is hard. It's really hard. And, I came into the Youngo space with no training, didn't have any idea what was going on in negotiations. And fortunately, the Youngo space is so great at building up other young people. And so I got a lot of expertise from them. But ultimately, what was successful was building on relationships that we had built from the previous COP, the previous SBs that other people had even started building. And so we're able to consistently check in with focal points and and reach out to them, contact them with our proposals. And so one is relationship building with the people that are making the decisions at the end of the day, which is really important to find your trusted ones that will really help guide you and give you feedback. Two, I think it was really essential that we came prepared. We proactively had decision text ready to go before we got to COP, and we said, this is what we want, and we gave it to negotiators to provide us feedback on, and that was really essential. And three, I think it's just honestly the sheer youth power of us coming together. And at COP, there's all these really big civil society spaces and pavilions that are really essential for sharing knowledge, but other of us are here to be in the rooms, to be bringing our chair with us to the decision-making tables. And that's what we did. We all came together, sitting outside negotiation rooms, sitting inside negotiation rooms, patiently waiting for our turn to move our voices and our perspectives forward. And so that's what I would say are some key tips. And then one fun thing is anytime you meet with the country, which is always important, bilaterally, like this would be bilateral, right? Like if I'm representing the United States and you're representing Germany, then this would be a bilateral conversation as an example. And taking a photo at the end of all of those is my number one tip, because then you can say, oh, let's take a photo on my phone. Oh, what's your phone number? I'd love to send it to you. And then you can have their ear that way. So really important.
Thank you. So next question, what has already happened on action for climate empowerment during the past years since the concept was established, and politically, so at COP, but also for implementation?
Yeah, so the main things, honestly, that have happened up until now have only really been at the international scale. Dialogues called the ACE dialogues, where people come together and share some best practices, and then they go home and see you later. And a little bit of reporting as well. But this past year, there was also the first ever ACE Youth Exchange. It was put together by a local government in Germany, North Rhine-Westphalia, something like that. Think I got it. And the UNFCCC calling this an ACE hub. And so that was really essential for activating more young voices in the space. And there's also an ACE AT project where people are bringing tech into the ACE space. There's a monitoring and reporting project ran by civil society. So there's a lot of people doing stuff. And then, of course, even things like this is ACE in action, right? Getting the word out and information out to people on the ground for people who can't be here. This is also an example of ACE. And so even if you don't see it every day, or it's not called ACE, which I should note in the US is not a good term for us, because we already have things that use the ACE acronym. It's really important that you're kind of seeing it all around you, even when you might not be saying, oh, I'm doing this because of ACE, you're just doing it because you want people to know that they should be caring about these things.
So yesterday we had the ACE thematic days.
Yeah.
So there on COP, there are always thematic days. We also covered in the Climate Youth News before. And maybe you can talk a little what happened yesterday on the ACE day, and also just the days, the theme days somehow affect, I don't know, the negotiations. Does it affect the public awareness? Does it have an effect?
Yeah, so yesterday was the first ever ACE day. Woo! So I was really excited to see an ACE.
Did you lobby for it?
You know what? I didn't lobby for it. I think they know me at this point, and I've been annoying them for far too long. So if we don't do this, people are going to be upset. So it's really exciting. And ACE Day was filled with so many different events on, how do you include monitoring and reporting? What are young people doing? What are some countries already doing for ACE? Some countries already bring young people as part of their delegation. So how can we learn from them? So it's really exciting to see that. In terms of if they make an impact and a difference, I think it kind of depends on the scale that you're looking at. I think they make an impact for civil society to be more aware of the different negotiation tracks and things that are priorities, even if they're not a negotiation track, to people. Like energy was also part of yesterday's theme. They had 2 themes in the day, but energy is not a negotiation track, but it's still really important. So I think the theme days kind of highlight key areas that we need to be pushing further on in the climate space. And so I think they're really essential. Do they make a difference on policy? I don't really think so. But I've only been to a couple COPs, so who am I to really say on that?
Okay, thank you. Maybe one last question. We have now Wednesday and we have like 2 days left, maybe 3. Let's see what happens.
We'll see.
And so what are the last steps for you at COP? Is there something for ACE or something else you are going to do the next days?
Yeah, so again, for ACE, for me, it's really moving into the implementation phase and seeing how I can hold my own country in the US accountable and level it up to the international scale moving forward. But right now, youth around the world are uniting for pushing for a loss and damage finance facility to create a funding mechanism for countries that are experiencing, floods that cause losses of land and life and culture that can simply not be regained at an easy scale or continuously flooded, and it's impossible to come back from that. And so global youth around the world right now are activating for this. They're partnering with, other groups we've heard advocating for this, such as, island groups we've heard publicly advocating for this. And so we are trying to come together to use our power, use tools that we've learned from ACE and being successful in these negotiations to put it into a track that is equally as important to ensuring our survival on this planet.
Thank you so much, Hailey.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for all questions, y'all.